Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Rover Product Enhancements v5.16, Automatic Posting of No-Show Charges, Expanded Reports and Exports, and more, presented by StaynTouch Implementation Consultant, Tyrus McGlone. I'm your host, Erin Fisher, the content writer here at StaynTouch. Today's presentation will cover how you can get the most out of Rover v5.16 product release. In this webinar, we will illustrate continued expansions to the contracts module, explore additions to reports and exports, review additional data spaces added to custom exports, identify expansions to language support, discover the addition of the group Forma Invoice, review the new tourist tax functionality, explore new filters added to the Journal Revenue tab, identify the new Wallet tab for company and travel agent cards, discover how to post no-show charges automatically at end of day, and finally, demonstrate how to deactivate add-ons no longer in use. We'll have a short Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Feel free to submit questions throughout the presentation, and we'll answer them in the order they are received at the end. And that's all I have right now. Tyrus, I'm going to hand the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Erin. All right, good morning to everyone. As Erin so kindly mentioned, my name is Tyrus and I will be going over today's webinar with you. I will start in order with the actual contracts module. As she mentioned, we have designed the module basically to reduce the number of rate cards that are attached to every company card. So if you're not familiar, or for those of you that are familiar, when you're going into the actual revenue management tool. So menu, revenue management, company, and TA cards. Of course, when you're creating a card, you will need to pretty much attach a rate to it in order for that rate to apply to a reservation. If I am simply looking up a card here, I'll say, for example, maybe Priceline. All right, I'll simply go to Priceline, and we have the Contracts tab here. Some of you may already be familiar with this, but we have the link existing contract, and we also have the create new contract. When you create a new contract, you can basically go in and name your own rate, as well as attach a rate in your rate config session to this actual company. Again, this reduces the number of contract rates that are basically created just to have one particular company. So multiple rates can be added to an actual company card. I'll simply go in and just say, let's say Priceline, Priceline Advance Purchase. And we'll just pretend this is a rate here, and we have an access code as well. The access code will be a unique identifier when creating reservations. So I can just say price or PRAP. And now you must have a start date and an actual end date here. So this will be mandatory. I will start it from the 9th, and I'll take it to the end of the year, or the end of 2021, since we normally book at least 1 year out. Now, the contracted nights here, this is not a mandatory field, but you can have it there if you choose. And I'll simply save my actual contract. And again, if I want to go in and attach an actual Priceline rate to this, I can now go in and attach the Priceline to this actual contract. And again, you can create multiple rates and contracts underneath this one company, as well as delete this contract if it's no longer in use. The next section I will go over is how to, looking at the new report functionality. So we've added one guest report, so guest in-house by nationality. I'll go to the menu option, reports, and then we have the new report option. And again, this report is actually called Guest In-House by Nationality. So if you're interested in pulling all of your in-house guests and checking to see the demographics of those reservations, I'll just simply search for this report. All right, and here it is, Guest In-House by Nationality. You can also sort by range of in-house guests, and you can also sort it by your country as well, and you can run this report. In addition to reports, we now have new data spaces inside of the custom export. So if I go back to the menu option, report, And I'm going to go to Schedule, Report, Export. We have the custom export option, and some of the new data exports that we have added. I'm going to go to new here, and we have the actual company data export, guest, and travel agency. So these are all new data fields or data spaces that we've added to the custom export functionality. All right, so many of you have asked about the rooming list and actually having the rooming list, the language apply inside of inside of a group rooming list. You can do this now. If you go to the menu option, groups, and since we are speaking of a rooming list, we will assume that this will be a managed group or a group that's already built inside of StaynTouch Rover. So I'm going to go to manage group, and I'll simply choose the Utley Wedding group here. Let's go. Actually, there's no one here. I'm going to actually go to a different hotel. All right, so no one's actually picked up on this group, but I will just go ahead and just show you the option for the rooming list. So if I go here to the rooming list tab, and I'll go to email print, we now have the language option here where you can choose and see which language you want to put it in when it comes to an actual rooming list, if you're sending it out or printing it. All right, next on the list will actually be the ProForma invoice, which is another good topic for those properties that are very, very in depth with a lot of groups, whether it's a citywide group or anything of that nature. ProForma invoice, of course, allows you to see the actual invoice prior to the actual group arrival. Of course, this invoice is multi-projected revenue. So I'm going to simply go to the same group, and I will go to the actual transactions tab, and I'll click on the blue invoice button. And if I go to the bill layout toggle here, you'll now see, actually, I'm sorry, this one won't work. Let me go to my other property. Apologies about that. So if I go to the bill layout, you actually see that ProForma invoice is now listed here. So in order to submit this ProForma invoice to an actual client prior to the group arrival. All right, next on the list is going to be the new tourist tax functionality. So we have some properties, of course, that actually will have a tourist tax. Our properties may not have this functionality. But if I were to go to, well, one thing we have changed for one has been one of our toggles here under the financial section. So if I go to settings, and I'll go over to financials. As you may recall, this actually was the actual invoice toggle, but now we have renamed it to financial settings. If I go here, you will see an actual toggle for tourist tax here. You can toggle this option on. If I toggle this on and I go down and I save this option, I'll then go and create a charge code. So if I wanted to create a new tourist tax, I'll say 9090. I'll link it to a charge group of taxes. And now the charge code type, again, this is where we've added the new tourist tax because we have toggled that on. In the background, I'll see tourist tax, which is now listed here. And I'll enter, of course, the tax amount. I'll just say 9%. Flat room, and I'll say per night, and I will go in and save these changes. And now one thing I will like to mention, once you toggle this on and you've applied a tax to it, you cannot go back and deactivate or toggle off that tourist tax because I've already linked it to an actual charge code. So if I go back to the financial settings, you'll see that tourist tax is now grayed out, so you cannot go back and finagle this once you have toggled it on and attached an actual charge code to it. All right, next on the list is going to be relevant to the actual journal of StaynTouch Rover. So I'm going to go to financials, journal. Now, many of you may be familiar with, the four tabs at the top, which we have the summary, revenue, payments, balance, and cashier. The payments tab actually has, the total, the pre-stay, the in-house, and then the post-day. We've actually added these same toggles to the revenue tab. So if I toggle over to revenue, you will see the same thing. Total, pre-stay, in-house, as well as post-stay for all of your revenue entries for this particular date range, whether it's the same date or if you want to finagle this date for post-stay. All right, then we'll go over to actual travel agency cards. Again, similar to the company, but we're referring to travel agency only. So I'm going to go to menu, revenue management, again, company and TA cards. I will search for, I'm pretty sure I have an Expedia here, and I do. All right, so if I go to Expedia here, we now have the wallet tab. So we have summary, contract, statistics, wallet, notes, commission, and activity log. Underneath the wallet tab, we actually have the option now to add a new payment method. So of course for Expedia travel agency cards, you probably won't ever add one here just because they typically send virtual cards. However, if you have a travel agency that will use the same card periodically, you can add a payment method here. I'll just enter a fake number. Give me one moment. All right, so now that I've added this here, it is available, as well as if I go to the actual summary tab and go to billing information, if I wanted to ever set up a route here, this card is now available on the travel agency tab as well. I can apply this to any type of room and tax if it's in regards to routing. All right, next is going to be the end of day settings. Many of the properties have asked about automatic posting for no-show charges during end of day process. We have actually enabled that now. If you go to the settings option, and you go to hotel and staff and settings and parameters, we actually have the post on end of day. I'm actually going to go to another property here just to show you a clearer understanding of. All right, so settings and parameters, and we have the toggle here for post during end of day. We have always had this actual option here for no-show charge code. However, now when you actually post a no-show charge code that's relevant, and you have the post end of day toggle turned on, anytime you have a no-show guest, end of day will automatically post those no-show charges for the room and tax for the first night stay. And last but not least are the add-ons. So we have many properties as well who may have add-ons inside of their property, and some of the add-ons are now not in use anymore. We have the option, of course, to add those dates there. However, we've tweaked the actual add-ons listing. So if I go to rates and add-ons here, you'll see that we used to actually call this description, but now we've changed it to active dates. If you scroll down, you'll see NA. Some of them actually have dates here if you choose an active date for that particular add-on. Once you have a date and a start date and an end date, once that end date passes, the add-on will become inactive and it will gray itself out. All right, and Erin, I'll hand it back over to you.
All right, thank you, Tyrus, for that insightful presentation.
You're welcome.
All right, I would now like to turn over the floor to questions. Remember, you can submit questions through the question box in the middle of the control panel. So I'll give everyone a couple seconds. All right, so our first question is, once a contract has expired, can you reinstate it?
The answer to that question, great question, by the way, the answer is no. Unfortunately, you must go and create a new rate or a new contract and add it to that company. One thing I would advise before that contract does expire, it may be best just to go in and modify that end date for the actual contract.
All right. And then the next is, can you view the group Forma invoice at any time?
Great question as well. For the ProForma invoice, you cannot view it at any time. You can only view the ProForma invoice if it is prior to the group's arrival. So for example, if the group is arriving today, January 9th, that ProForma invoice will not be available only days prior to that arrival date.
All right. And then next, can an expired add-on be toggled back on?
It cannot be toggled back on. However, let me just show you a visual here. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me actually share my screen so I can show her. All right. So hopefully everyone can see my screen now. So if I wanted to toggle an add-on, or if I want to reactivate an actual add-on, I cannot do it just by toggling it on. You will actually need to click on the actual add-on itself and just modify that actual end date. And that's the way to turn the add-on back active, but you cannot toggle it.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, back to me. All right, and it looks like we have one more question. What would the group ProForma invoice show? Would it only be reservations that have picked up the block?
That is correct. It will only be reservations that have picked up the block, unlike the actual balance details section of the group, which actually gives projected revenue for all of the group was contracted. The ProForma will only show what's picked up.
All right, and we have one other question. Will the ProForma invoice show the tax also?
Yes, it will. It will show room tax and any other add-ons that you may have pertaining to either the room charge code or the group itself that's billed.
All right, and now I'll wait a couple more seconds to see if any questions come in. All right, looks like there aren't any more questions. So now I'd like to take the floor to offer some final thoughts. All right, today we illustrated continued expansions to the contracts module, explored additions to reports and exports, reviewed additional dataspaces added to custom exports, identified expansions to language support, discovered the addition of the group ProForma invoice, reviewed the new tourist tax functionality, explored new filters added to the journal revenue tab, identified the new wallet tab for company and travel agent cards, discovered how to post no-show charges automatically at end of day, and demonstrated how to deactivate add-ons no longer in use. Oh, and it looks like we actually had another question come in. Let me pull it up. And that's, is there a toggle to get to the tax to sew?
I'm sorry, what was that question?
Is there a toggle to get to the tax to sew? Brenda, I'm not sure what you mean by so. If you could type in that in the questions box, I can get that question answered.
Maybe she needs toggle to show.
Yeah, to show.
So, Brenda, to answer your question, I'm assuming you possibly may mean to get the text to show. Yes, that will be the actual tourist to tax toggle that that's actually listed under the financial settings under financials. Again, you must toggle on, if you go to the actual menu option, settings, settings in the sub menu, you will go to financials and you will see financial settings. At that point, you can actually toggle that on, but you must add an actual charge code to the actual tax type now in order for that to appear.
All right. Oh, and we have a few more questions actually. So the next one is from Connie. Do the no-show charged reservations count as an occupied room?
So they will not count as an occupied room. Like I said, this is specifically if you have an actual no-show charge code, especially, and one thing I would advise, we have some properties that may actually have an occupied or occupancy tax attached to that no-show charge code. I would strongly advise checking with, your city and state, tax laws. Many of the properties that I work with will never have an actual occupied or occupancy tax with the no-show charge code. But so far as posting, it will not go as like an occupied room.
All right, and this is from Brenda again. She says, when I pull the ProForma, it doesn't show the tax.
Oh, I'm sorry, for a ProForma invoice. That should be.
Let me switch to Tyrus's screen. All right.
All right, thank you so much. All right, so I'm going to go to one of my groups here. I don't believe there's a toggle that needs to be turned on. Yeah, so there shouldn't be any toggle. Brenda, if you can see my screen here, let me zoom in for, actually, I don't think my Zoom is working. Give me 1 second, Brenda. I'm going to see if I can zoom in and change any point. So Brenda, unfortunately, my Zoom doesn't appear to be working, but I can see here that if text is included or excluded, it will actually show this amount here. Looks like on this group itself, I do have a tax exempt. However, taxes will be included. If you provide the name of your property to Aaron here in the chat box, I can take a look, or have someone take a look at it for you. Specifically for your property, and then we can get back with you one-on-one with that particular.
Yeah, and if you want to email that to me, that might be easier. So I'll share that in a few seconds. But if there are any questions, feel free to type them in. Otherwise, with that, I'd like to conclude our presentation. Thank you all for coming, and if you have any additional questions, please reach out to me at, let me pull my screen up. So please reach out to me at aaron.fisher@shigigroup.com. And thanks again.
Thank you, everyone.